We're thrilled to be joined by one of the world's most successful investors and entrepreneurs, Reid Hoffman. You're the co-founder of LinkedIn, partner at Greylock, on the founding board member of PayPal, and on the board of Microsoft, in addition to the author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, The Startup of You. Reid, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be talking to you again.
Awesome. So I would love to start up with this book, and that's the reason why you're here in New York today. You first wrote The Startup of You over a decade ago. Tell us about that aha moment where you went from your personal evolution as a multi-stage entrepreneur, then to a seed angel investor, then to a venture capitalist, and now to an author. What made you decide to write the book?
So my high school, which is not too far from here, the Putney School in Vermont, generates, educators, artists, other sorts of folks. They asked me to give the commencement speech. And I was like, well, I'm a very odd person. I think I know in the entire history of a Putney alumni, the other two that are in the tech industry at all. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, okay, I'll do it. But, what could I possibly say from my experience to these people in very different walks of life? And what I realized is the world has changed. Not that we should all be entrepreneurs, some of us should be entrepreneurs, but we should all be entrepreneurial. And that skills of being entrepreneurial are important, by the way, more important now even than before because of pandemic and change in industries and all these things, but we should bring the skill set of an entrepreneur to your own life, even if what you're doing is just, getting jobs and working in interesting companies and doing the thing that's great for you. And so I gave that speech. I circulated it to some friends, and they said, you need to write a book. And I was like, writing a book? Sounds kind of retro. Right? Like, okay, I guess I'll do that. Had known my co-author, Ben Kesnoka, from other context, talked to him about it, and we did it. And it's all the advice that kind of an entrepreneur would give, not for starting companies, although you can use it for that, but for kind of being smart about this modern world and how you navigate the progress of your career.
And looking back to the original release of the book, I was going back and watching some of the content from there, and what I found fascinating was this video that you guys made, of this 8-minute video talking about, thinking about yourself like you're running a business as an entrepreneur. And what are some of the key takeaways that you think really people should be focused on when they're thinking about their career?
So, typical career advice tends to be discover your passion. What motivates you? And by the way, that's important. Of course you should, because if I hate that, then you're probably not going to be good at it. You're certainly going to be miserable, right? So passion's important. But when you think about it from a business perspective, an entrepreneurship perspective, it's like, well, what are your products and services? What are your skills? What are you offering? Well, what does the market want? Well, maybe you say, well, look, I'm really, really good at writing, but actually speaking on video I'm pretty good at, and that's actually, in fact, there's much more demand for that, right? And so there's what the market looks like. There's the competition, right? So what are my competitive edges? What is the thing that I have that fewer other people have? And that also helps you with your kind of market price. And then how do you think about investing in yourself? Like you say, okay, as opposed to just kind of stumbling through life, thinking about it as because a business will invest in a nicer storefront, some better chairs, maybe a flyers or something, or something else. Well, how do you do that in a way to make yourself better, to have progress? And that's, of course, the 50,000-foot level. But then you go down into the details of having a network is really useful. Figuring out how to take risks smartly is useful. Figuring out how to kind of make decisions around how you engage in social media, or all of these modern tools, which is, of course, part of the reason why we updated the book, because when we did that one, there wasn't so much on social media, right, or gig work, or any of this other stuff. And so, okay, let's make sure all of those are covered, because those are part of the modern experience.
The modern economy and what work looks like today. Yeah. And we were speaking before the interview started, and I think, I'm still of the generation that, our parents taught us that you need to stay in the same place for a long time, if not, the majority of your career. It was a prideful moment if somebody stayed at the same company for 10, 15, 20 years. I stayed at my previous employer over a decade, but that's not the norm now, and that's actually not the best route to be successful. And part of that video that I watched was like, is it the company's responsibility to promote you? Is it your institution's, educational institution's responsibility to educate you enough for the rest of your career? No, it's ours. And so I think, you know, people feel like they're a bit confused, especially post-pandemic. We've seen this huge surge in entrepreneurship that we haven't seen in 40 years, according to the census. And at the same time, people are, it's the resignation economy. People are shifting jobs faster than ever. So for this new post-pandemic environment, what are some key guidance or advice that you've noticed that can help people succeed?
So I think part of what you need to do is say, okay, how do you convert challenges into opportunities? So like, okay, pandemic, economic asteroid, hit a lot of industries, hit a lot of careers, hit a lot of people's geophysical locations. That means there's a shakeup. That also is, by the way, part of the reason why thinking about it like an entrepreneur does. Because an entrepreneur says, oh, the market's changing, there's a new technology, you know, the internet's coming, there's something I can do. Well, it's the same thing for you and your career and your jobs as a way of doing that. So the first thing you want to do is kind of say, okay, well, given these changes, as opposed to go, it's changed, like, oh, what's now possible? Then you use your network, right? You call smart people, maybe go out to lunch with someone that you know and go out to lunch and say, hey, what's going on? Which industries are growing and thriving, recovering? Which ones are a good fit? You may not even you shouldn't necessarily just be doing that because I'm looking for a job this week, next week, obviously super important if that's what you're doing. But that general kind of awareness and connection, because like, for example, you're a journalist, you might say, oh, actually, in fact, in addition to doing like podcasts, maybe I should do a YouTube thing, maybe I should do a TikTok thing, maybe I should be one of the earliest journalists doing TikTok. And it's like, okay, that's an experiment, right? Like try things, like, well, maybe there's something interesting, or maybe someone's doing it well and I can talk to them and can see what's happening. And that's bringing the entrepreneurial mindset to the current time. Now, one of the things we did in the updated edition, because obviously we talked about LinkedIn, but we also, we didn't talk about social media as much. And so like having followers and like why everyone might think about like, actually, in fact, if I'm going and sharing content and I'm going and kind of saying some things about what I am, what I'm doing, what I'm seeing, it doesn't have to all be work and professional, but that kind of thing. You build followers who are, Twitter, Instagram, other things, who are like, oh, are paying attention to what you're doing, and that could be actually also helpful in your network. And then of course we have the gig economy and we have the creator economy, and those are all, when they're relevant to you, are things that possibly to do as part of how you're navigating.
And so this all naturally feeds into the future of work, something that is emerged as a huge, huge topic, as companies are still trying to figure out return to the office, a hybrid work model, a full back to the office. There's some industries like Wall Street want everyone back in the office and have been back for over a year. Others, like media companies, ours included, are more flexible. What do you foresee as what the future of work will really look and feel like over the next couple of years?
So people tend to prognosticate, unfortunately, in two ways. They tend to go, oh, it's going to roll back to what it is exactly 2019, maybe with a little changes. Or they go, and now it's all distributed and it's all going to change. And the actual truth of the matter is it's going to not be what it was, but also, and there's going to be key things that are persistent learning. But what's going to happen now is there's the same impulse to get back to the office, to work together. There's going to be, like, I don't think headquarters will be abandoned and so forth. But now, we have a whole set of tools to actually make distributed work a lot better. So you could easily see no meetings Wednesdays where people might be working from home. You might see places where they say, well, actually we'll have a smaller office and we'll have a lot more hoteling and people will be moving between them. And maybe that person who generally does a lot of great work and moved out of state comes in a week a month and does that. And that now works as a pattern, because it gives companies a broader range of talent, gives people a broader range of options, but it will be very idiosyncratic. The reason why there isn't one simple thing is because while the tool set has definitely expanded, and all of the internet native productivity tools, whether they're Coda or Figma or all these other things, will now be enhanced and used a lot. There's still that human impulse of in the Hamilton line, being in the room where it happens. Right. And so that will persist.
One of the things you talk about in the book, and you've spoken about before, is flexible persistence. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yep. So one of the things that's interesting about entrepreneurship is it's kind of a yin and yang. It's a combination of two things. And so in entrepreneurial advice, you go have a vision and grit and go there no matter what and pound your head through the wall and stay persistent and challenge and work your way through adversity. On the other hand, well, learn, figure out if it's product market fit, change, adapt, get intelligence and so, oh, not that plan, this one. Persistence and flexibility. And the answer is you have to put both of them together. Because you have to be making these judgments about, well, actually, in fact, if I'm pounding my head on this wall, I will get through it. Right? It isn't a 20-foot thick brick wall. It's a 1-foot thick brick wall, and I can get through. And on the other hand, like learning from, well, actually, that is too thick of a wall, or the competition just doesn't work, or that's just not interesting. My theory about what I was doing wouldn't work. And so you should always be listening and learning, being in permanent beta, as you know, for doing this. And you bring those two things together. And that's, of course, the same thing for careers, because the question is, you might say, well, I actually think this industry is going to be huge. And you say, well, there'll be more pictures and more images than ever, and the world will continue to enhance that in media. But what you might have started at Kodak and actually in fact, oh no, I should be heading towards Instagram.
Another thing that you talk a lot about is the power of your network. But what sometimes is a blanket statement, everybody says that you need a really strong network and that will get you where you need to go. But that's a little bit of a myth in and of itself, right?
Yes.
There's 3 different layers. There's the people that know you really well, and then there's various circles of influence and acquaintances, and it's important to kind of marry those. Can you talk a little bit about your strategy for how to use the network most efficiently?
Yep. And thank you for having read the book. Right. Yes. So there's kind of your allies, your strong ties. Those are people who would, put some blood or sweat into helping you. Those are people who there's a very close tie of loyalty. It could be from your close friends. It could be that your close colleagues. It could be family members. It could be, any number of things. And those people will do very key things for you. They'll sit down with you. They might tell you like, your LinkedIn profile needs some improvement.
Mine does.
Yes, right. Et cetera, et cetera. Then there's your friendlies. Those are people that, look, you like each other. You may have met at a conference, may have had breakfast or coffee sometime. Certainly remember, you're kind of like, oh yeah, we talked about this or something. That gives a much broader range, which sociologists call weaker ties, but because that'll have a broader radar. Most likely, your allies, your close ties, if they had a piece of advice, they would have already given it to you. And when you're kind of looking up and kind of going, whoa, how's the world changing? What's going on? Your friendlies are a very good way of doing that. And that's one of the reasons why to occasionally have lunch, stay in touch, that kind of thing is an important thing to do every so often. And then your followers, right? The people that you may be like, people don't realize how many ways you can use LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram to actually even having a small following can be able to, because if it's a following and something that you're doing, like you say, well, actually, in fact, my expertise is thinking about how, kind of like, it could even be like social media, but it could be like my expertise is taking pictures, like my hobby is taking pictures of birds. Well, you may have a broad of people who go, ooh, I love birds too, and that's something I do, and that can be a connection through your followership that can also even give you a broader range and new networks. And so it's really important to have the skills, it's really important to do the work, it's really important to have achievement, but it's important to amplify that with these layers of network.
Layering in that perspective can prove invaluable and get you to where you want to go.
Yeah, 100%. And part of it is you can be intentional about your network. Love Adam Grant's work, by the way. You can be intentional about your network while still being human. Think of it as a dance you're doing together. It's not, oh, you're part of my network, I have your business card, et cetera. It's like, no, we are allies. We are doing this together. And so it can be very human, and you can still be conscious about it, saying, oh yeah, it'd be really good if we grab coffee every so often, but just be human about it.
What do you think is some of the hardest advice to take in the book, hardest advice to implement, or something that people might misunderstand?
Probably is taking risk intelligently. Most people are pretty freaked out about risk. Most people want stability in what they're doing. And by the way, part of our thing is adaptability is the new stability, like learning and so forth. It can be a little challenging, but you can do it actually. It isn't, you have to be, jump 20 feet. It's just try new things a little bit and be willing to fail a little bit initially as you're doing that and kind of do that. And that's part of taking risk intelligently. Because when you take risks, you'll learn something. When you take risks, you might get a breakout opportunity. When you take risk, you may discover something amazing about yourself. And so figure out how to take small risks intelligently. Life is a team sport, not a solo sport. Have your team help you, your allies, your friendlies. Evaluate the risk, navigate it, make it lesser, recover from it easily. But that's probably the thing that most people would find most challenging.
So I want to shift gears a little bit. You are also the host of an award-winning podcast, Masters of Scale, and you are personal friends and have had incredible guests on the show, ranging from Elon Musk to Brian Chesky to Melody Hobson to Jack Dorsey to you name it. What are some of the lessons or observations that maybe you've found from some of those individuals and other entrepreneurs that either you've mentored or it could also be advice that you've given that could translate to a broader audience, things that people could kind of implement?
So one of the delights of being the interviewer, the host of Masters of Scale, is not just that I get to interview my friends, that's cool, but also I get to learn from them. I get to sit down and kind of ask questions and learn myself. And then when I'm thinking about which of these learnings are best to pass along, that's the thing that becomes a show. And also, by the way, we only release the episodes once I've got, oh yeah, we got it. This is something I've learned from, this is something I'm doing. So literally all of the episodes are things that I've learned from. I'd say, kind of personal, kind of some great things is I interviewed Franklin Leonard from The Blacklist, and part of it was realizing that systems thinking isn't just a technology thing, which I do a lot of systems thinking, network thinking within technology, but he also does it within content generation in Hollywood and how that all works. And so the kind of lesson is to say, you can actually apply these kinds of lessons between industries and between things, because you wouldn't necessarily think, oh, the person who goes into Hollywood for scripts and kind of being an agent, like what he did is, I gotta read all these scripts. Well, maybe we just email a bunch of people from an account and say, tell me the best scripts that you saw that you're never gonna make. And then that all iterates into The Blacklist. Like that's wow. Yeah, exactly. Or very early, Miriam Nafisi, and this is part of like taking risk and doing things in her life. She was creating this business, Eve.com, and the parent had bought Eve for their daughter, and she was trying to negotiate the purchase for it, and the parent was like, well, you have to negotiate with my daughter. So she ended up negotiating with a 5-year-old for the domain for her business, which of course is just a delightful story. But the thing that she realized, she gave the kid a lot of money, but that wasn't what closed the deal. What closed the deal was the trip to Disneyland.
Oh, wow. Right. That's a good one.
Right. So things like that, and that's the being experimental, trying new things that you haven't before, because it was like, as opposed to like, no, I'm going to send the lawyers, it's like, no, I'm going to go do it myself. And that's among the things that makes Miriam such an amazing entrepreneur.
So no, the word no is something that you hear a lot as an entrepreneur, and I'm sure you've heard it many times in your career, and it's something that people also face whenever they're trying to push the envelope within a company or corporation. What are some lessons that you can get from hearing the word no?
Yep. And by the way, you're proving that you're very well read, because I'm certain you've also picked that up from our Masters of Scale book. Yes. And part of the thing that people normally go, and when you're trying to help people figure out how to navigate and learn things, it's take things that are somewhat counterintuitive. Because most of us, when you hear no, it's like, oh, it's depressing. It's like, oh no, I have to walk away, etc. Actually, in fact, how do you learn from no's? How do you have no's be the thing that amplifies you? And it isn't the kind of classic sales, don't take no for an answer, Because by the way, that's sometimes pretty irritating. When people
I'm
are
sure you have had some pretty annoying
Yes.
entrepreneurs be like, I don't take no for an answer.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, and that's not good, right?
Yeah.
It's people interacting. And so, but what you do is you say, okay, what can I learn from it, right? So like, for example, if you're pitching a business and someone says no, it's like, okay, please tell me why, right? Because I might learn something. I might learn something on how to pitch. I might learn something on how to refine the idea. I might learn something from network intelligence. Like very early in LinkedIn, what everyone was telling me is it's a network product. The first person no value, second person no value, third person no value. You have to get like to hundreds of thousands of people before it's valuable. Oh, that's useful I should steer into that. I should figure out how to solve that in order to build that because that's network intelligence, what you're getting. So when you get no's, think about how can I learn from it? How can I adjust? Don't treat it as a soul-crushing moment or I shrink moment. Treat it as a learning moment, as a way to accelerate how you're going forward.
Mm-hmm. So you've been investing since when? The late 90s, the mid 90s?
I would say probably late 90s because, in some sense I put a little bit of money into PayPal, and that was probably my first investment. Very lucky.
Very lucky. Well, no, very smart. I mean, I actually wrote a book proposal based on the untold story of PayPal, so I actually know a lot about that. And you did a lot of key fundamental work there. So how do you figure out which ideas are worth investing in?
So there's different patterns of investing. One of the things is you should certainly, if you are doing investing, have a theory about why you have a massive competitive differentiation and have expertise. It's a little bit like, think of the poker game. If you look around the table and you can't spot the sucker, then you are the sucker. So similarly, you got to say, okay, why am I a differentially good investor? Investing is one of those things people can do it, but you need to have that. So for me, and there's, by the way, investors who do other kinds of things, other industries, other things that are expert at that, and I always, like Warren Buffett, amazing, different kind of investing than what I do. So what I do is I look at a very early stage technology, a founder where she or he or they might be, have a kind of a good plan, be unique in the market, have a unique kind of like an idea for what they can do. And there may be some real risks, like Airbnb. When I invest in that, it's like all kinds of things that could go wrong with that. But you look at all that and you say, if it goes right, it'll be huge. Mm-hmm. Okay, what's the chance it'll go right? What's the theory of the case? What are the risks? How do you navigate them? Can these people do it? Can I help them do it? And that's the kind of investment, that's my core investing.
Mm-hmm. What's one big investment regret that you have? A big opportunity like Airbnb that you said no to? Maybe it's Uber.
It's a long list.
Yeah, well, tell us a few and why, that if it makes it big, it'll be huge, wasn't enough to seal the deal.
Well, if I have that whole framework, then sometimes maybe a risk would cause it to be not the thing. One of the ones that feels most personally painful, because I really like Ben Silverman and Paul Sciarra, they came before the venture round with Pinterest, and they sat down and said, look, we got this interesting traction, it's this really interesting thing. And I just didn't think it could be big enough because I didn't understand pin boards as a new media type. And I just, oops, right? And so that was kind of the misestimation of, that's not that, I didn't see how it could be big, right? And that's one of the things. Actually, there was a funny thing where, someone I knew had told me, I met Airbnb a year later than I otherwise would have, because I was having this conversation, you should hear about this thing, Airbnb, it's great, it's couch surfing. And I was like, couch surfing is a terrible idea, right? I mean, because it's all the weaknesses of the weirdness of you're in the shared space and all the rest, with none of the glory, the amazing thing, like renting an apartment or renting a penthouse or a house or all these castle, all these other things. And by the way, still some people, the transaction's renting a couch, but you have to go the whole gamut of the experience and what are the experiences of being local to the community. And so I was like, that's not interesting. And so even though Brian had emailed me earlier, I was like, I'm too busy. And it took a year to come back to. And then literally in the first 2 minutes where Brian and Joe and Nate were pitching Airbnb, I was like, okay, I'm going to make you an offer to invest. put the pitch aside, let's make this a working session. What are you working on? What are the challenges? What do you think the next problem is? Why is that? Let's do that. Because I don't need to see the rest of the pitch. I already know that I'm going to make you an offer.
And were they prepared to share that with you on the fly, or yeah?
Yeah, well, because they're all three of them. They're great entrepreneurs.
Yeah. So shifting gears a little bit into what's in the news right now, there's been a lot of attention being paid to one of your buddies from the PayPal days, Elon Musk, purchasing Twitter. What are your thoughts on that acquisition?
So Elon's obviously one of the, maybe the most storied and amazing entrepreneur of our time. Let's revolutionize the space industry. Let's revolutionize the car industry. Oh, this AI thing's important. Let's do this Neuralink thing. All of these amazing things. And so I think that and I think Twitter has been slow on its innovation. So I think that bringing a great innovator into this new zone is going to be a very interesting thing. I also think that his stated idea through Twitter that of doing more human identity validation is, I think, a very good thing. One obviously has to be careful about where this plays out to activists in oppressive countries, or even people who are oppressed minorities within well-formed democracies, and you have to make sure that you're attentive to that. But I think human identity validation is, generally speaking, a very good thing, and a good thing that we do a lot of at LinkedIn, right? I mean, in terms of trying to make sure everyone has is there as I'm Reid Hoffman, and this is really my profile and who I am. And so I think that's all a very good thing. And look, I think it's, Elon always thinks big, and so jumping into what is otherwise a horrifically difficult problem, right? Cultural conflict in society, freedom of speech issues. How do you balance a freedom of speech with we'd like to have a society that is a little kinder, right? A little bit more, building bridges versus burning them. And how do you sort all that out? Very difficult journey. Elon has a lot of guts.
So I remember you had said that I think you were his second call on SpaceX, right?
Yes.
So are there any calls that you can share for other investments or deals that he's maybe made to you?
Well, Elon and I are friends and we know each other well, so I do get calls. And I think one of the reasons is because I don't talk about them very much.
Right, makes sense. Well, I have to ask.
Yes.
And then in terms of the work that you're doing at Greylock and the venture capital industry overall, where are you seeing the greatest amount of opportunity right now? I know you recently started your first company since LinkedIn. It's an AI company. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
A little. We're still mostly in stealth mode, but so I've been doing a bunch of stuff in artificial intelligence. I'm on the board of OpenAI, board of Microsoft. We at Greylock have invested in companies like Adept, and so AI is going to be one of those very big transformational, probably of all industries. Really amazing. And so Mustafa Suleyman, co-founder of DeepMind, and I were talking about his coming and helping us at Greylock with AI, and he agreed to do that, and then he then came to me and said, look, I also have this really interesting idea around not doing the kind of thing that we were doing at DeepMind so much, which is how do we build this kind of completely new artificial intelligence that kind of is doing its own thing, but also how do we help human beings discover their own superpowers, navigate the world and so forth, and a set of ways of taking these language models and these foundational models and doing that. And there's obviously a specific idea, unfortunately, not yet ready to share, but let's do that. And I said, okay, look, I'll fund it and so forth. And he said, well, actually, in fact, would you co-found it with me? And I said, I think it's important enough, since the first time since LinkedIn that I would do that.
So I can come to you with my important idea and you might co-found it with me.
Well, I certainly wouldn't want to call out an advertisement for that, right? But if it's possibly going to really improve the world massively at scale, then I'd certainly like to get the call.
All right, well, I'll put my thinking cap on then. Well, Reid, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Always a pleasure and an honor.